computer. Wonderful. So I am here with my friend Sandra. We are doing a combined tarot and astrology reading. I'm so glad that we are doing this today with each other and that you're letting me look at your chart. So for those of you who are looking at the screen, you will see Sandra's natal chart or birth chart, and we look at this to see where her planets are sitting, what houses they're sitting in, and where the signs are occurring in her chart as well. So we're going to do a little combination reading here, and I'm shuffling the cards. The tarot cards are right over here. And Sandra, we talked a little bit about the direction of how we'd like to what kind of question we'd like to look at in the tarot today, right? So we start out with a question, and your question again is, I'll let you verbalize it as I start to draw cards for you.
I just want to like know what 2022 has for me. Like I'm like I just need to know like where I can find gratitude in 2022, because 2021 was really hard.
Yeah.
And like it didn't love me back.
It was a one-sided relationship.
Like I need to find a way for, you know, for me to like work with 2022, because I like it's like a bad relationship, like, you know.
Yeah, it sounds like being involved with like a narcissist or something. Right? It's all about you, 2021. All right, so I am pulling cards. You can't see it on the screen, folks, but I've got my little table next to me, and I'm drawing cards. And the way I'm drawing the cards is I'm thinking about Sandra's question, her inquiry, and sometimes I work with a fixed pattern for the cards, like a Celtic cross. And other times I work with sometimes like a little bit of a mini cross. So today I'm working with a bit of a mini cross just for time. And we're going to look at the direction that the deck is taking us to address that question. And then we're using the knowledge and the wisdom of Sandra's chart in the background here. And you can see where her planets are. So I'll just talk a little bit before I start to pull the cards. They've already been drawn. I'm going to turn them over in a minute. But we'll just go right off that with seeing that her sun is in Aquarius, her moon is in Cancer, and her ascendant or her rising sign is in Virgo. All right, so I'm just going to lay that out there, and then we can look at some of the other planetary placements, the signs, the houses, where all that is gelling. But in the meantime, I'm going to start to flip cards, okay? So for the first card, and I put them together as a story. So the first card I've drawn for you, my dear, is the Hierophant. Okay, so I'm going to hold that up so you can see it. Yes, right? That's when I asked for the card to, not to define you, but to symbolize your situation, a foundational card to sort of embody and represent you. This is what came up, the Hierophant. Okay, so I'm going to lay that there. I'm going to talk about the meaning in a second. I asked what could be crossing you, and what could be crossing you here, as I get my camera together, is the Knight of Pentacles.
Wow.
Yes, right? Okay, so we have Nine of Pentacles crossing. I'm looking at something here in what could be identified as a bit of a recent past. What's going on in the background? And I have the Queen of Cups. All right, so she's hanging out over here. And when I'm looking to see what might be kind of circling around you, like an environment, I have pulled the Eight of Wands. And the Eight of Wands is reversed. No surprise there, right? What's going on around you? Delays, obstacles, right? I think we can all relate to that idea of Eight of Wands reversed. Things aren't moving exactly as smoothly as perhaps we would want them to, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then over here below you, I have something that's, I asked for the foundation. I asked for something in the recent past that's kind of in the background, but now I'm looking to see what is sort of the basis. This goes a little bit deeper into the roots of what might be going on. I have Ten of Wands reversed.
Wow. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And now we don't talk about necessarily what's the future holds in the sense of predicting what it might look like, but we can look at something that could be coming through to you, right? So I'm asking for something that's coming and on its way to come through to you, and the energy is the Emperor.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so you had the Hierophant to start, and then you have the Emperor to cap it all off. So
Wow.
isn't that powerful? So
That's very powerful.
isn't that powerful? So in some ways, right off the bat, I want to say that in relation to the foundation, which is you, Hierophant, and what is coming through to you, Emperor, I'm sensing that you are your own boss, girl. That's where we're going with this.
Amazing.
You are your own authority, okay? The energy for 2022 is for you to take your power back, for you to remember that you are whole and um, uh, you are the element of love, of you are spirit, you are all parts of the Holy Trinity, in the sense that mind, body, spirit, you belong to you. And in this upside down, topsy-turvy world, nothing will change that. You will always be your own boss, your own guide, your own authority. So this is really calling you to take another look at authority and rules and regulations. Now, right, like I'm creating an anarchist, right, as we speak. But I mean, I kind of support that idea in a way. I mean, like, like, nothing's gonna get hurt. No one's gonna get hurt. No dolphins have been harmed in this video. But this idea of looking past structures, looking past things that are put in place, but are not that are not necessarily, with your Nine of Pentacles, they are not necessarily helping you feel whole, safe, and secure.
Mm.
So, okay, part of the reason why we have foundations and structures and these kinds of elements put into place is to contain chaos. We talked about chaos, I think, even before we started recording, right? We had a little intimate session, and the idea that chaos is all around us, and chaos it's part of life, but there is a way to come to terms with the unknown or the chaotic, and to harness that energy and help divine it into something that is something that you can grasp, that you can somehow tangibly touch and appreciate, even if you don't completely understand it. All right. So in other words, it's also about mysticism and the approach, and like the approach of like that mystical attitude toward life, or as the living as a mystic, in the sense that there is bliss in being part of the fabric of things, and and there's no sense of hierarchy, there's no sense of who's in charge of me. It's like being your own divine guide. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that said, we're also going to just touch on the Queen of Cups. So what could be going on in the background, right? What could be going on in the recent past? And when the Queen of Cups comes up, she loves to, first of all, she's an incredible creator. She's an innovator. Her cup, her chalice, looks nothing like any of the other cups in the suit. She's got her own very special cup, and she's looking at it in a way that is, she's really showing it. She's really kind of putting it out there, and this is her. She's lovingly looking at this creation, and it's so different than anything else that's you can see in the tarot. All of the other cups look completely different. She's got a really special one. So the cups and the idea of emotion and feelings, through our feelings, we can create newness. Through our hearts, we can create newness. And we think sometimes, and I'll talk a little bit about your chart too, is that we talked about the earth elements and being very of this world. When we are guided by those elements of earth, for instance, Virgo being your rising sign. Virgo, we talked a little bit earlier too, is that Virgo is a sign of order, of making sure that there's a reason for things, that we're not doing things helter-skelter, that there's a rhyme and reason, and that there's a there's a place for everything, and everything is in its place. That's sort of Virgo, right? That sense of organization. But it's also as an earth sign, it's also the embodiment, right? It's also, so earth, and our bodies are of the earth. We are of the earth. We're not separate from the earth. So I think there's an invitation to marry the idea that through our heart space is we create through the heart space. We bring those earthly elements, those things that we value so much as identified earth signs. We bring those physical, tangible things into the world, yes, through application and hard work and conceptualization, but it also comes from our heart space. What does the heart want to see? So I feel that before we even move to some of the other cards to look at what they might mean, is that right off the bat, my sense is what 2022 will hold for you is whatever you want it to be. Now,
That's amazing.
now we know that there are elements outside of ourselves that come into play, okay? For instance, the Eight of Wands, when I was looking for a card surrounding the environment. Just because things aren't going the way we want them to, just because the environment around us is moving slower than we want it to, or moving, or not just slower, because the Eight of Wands has to do with action, but sometimes it doesn't necessarily always have to do with speed. This reversal can indicate that we're not pleased with what's happening. It doesn't matter if it's happening fast or slow. We're not pleased with what's happening. And when we're not pleased with what's happening around us, it can feel like we're carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders.
Yeah.
It can feel like the burden is too great to bear.
Yeah.
The reason we feel that way is because we're picking up that which is not ours to carry, though. So we're picking up stuff that is not ours.
Wow.
Now, it doesn't mean that we're going to disassociate from others' suffering. It doesn't mean that we're disassociating from being a part of this world that needs us. But we can only be effective when we are in our power. If we show up to the rally or the protest or if we show up to the crisis and we are not empowered and we are not sitting in our power, we get caught up in the energy of that chaos. And then the chaos becomes chaos for its own sake. So disruption and chaos and friction is not a problem. It's a problem when we forget that we don't have agency over ourselves. So very much like when we're looking at your chart, for instance, right? So the chart that you shared with us is showing where all of your planets are, where your signs are, what's in the houses. And in some cases, if you could look at planets that are squared to one another, and you could say, oh my goodness, signs and planets that are squared to one another, you could say, oh, well, that's challenging. That could be an issue. It's not, without that friction, without those challenges, we don't understand the depth of our fortitude. We need that friction. We need those challenges. We may not like the challenges and we may not like the friction, but it's integral to our personal growth. So if we reject the fact that the friction is present or that the challenges are present, and we're like, no, this isn't happening, what we miss out on is all of the richness, the wisdom, and the strength building that can occur when we recognize those challenges, recognize that friction. So one thing I would say too is that in your chart, you have Saturn, the planet Saturn in your 12th house. And Saturn is all about rules, regulations. It rules Capricorn, right? And it's the planet of time. It's like father time. And Saturn is also a discipline daddy. Saturn likes to not only have rules, it likes it when we follow the rules, and it likes it when we adhere to um, certain principles and authority. The thing about Saturn, though, as it relates to Capricorn, is that Saturn ruling over a sign that is an earth sign, is that Saturn only likes those things when it's right, when it feels right in the body. So Saturn, for the sake of rules and regulations and authority, that's not really necessarily what it's there for only, especially in the 12th house. The 12th house wants you to listen to your dreams. The 12th house wants you to wants you to listen to your intuition. It doesn't want you to, there's so much richness in the 12th house. And so what I'm seeing here is that with with Saturn and Leo, Leo loves to be, so this is interesting. It's all in the 12th house for you because we've got Leo that is a sign that's like, I'm out there, here I am, love me for what I am. You know, the sun card in the tarot, here I am, I'm here to be seen, I'm here to be appreciated, figure it out. If you don't like me yet, figure out a way to like me, or at least see me. And there's something about Saturn in the 12th house in Leo for you, I think, that is inviting you to again come back into that sense of you being your own sense of authority by listening to your intuition and by listening to the gifts of Leo, which is courage. So it's going to, so facing 2022 is going to be a blend of courage, calling on your heart, but also the fierceness, the fierceness of Leo. It's a lion, right? Like, you know, like I taunted a lion and everything went well, said no one ever. Like Leo doesn't like to be played with. Leo doesn't like to be bamboozled. Leo doesn't like to be taunted, right? And so when you are finding yourself in situations that are instigating and like niggling at you in a way where it's there to set off your reaction, right? It's there to like get a rise out of you. The medicine in that placement is to rely on Saturn's discipline and be like, no, I'm not that easily shakable. No, you can't. You know, you can't come in here and rattle my cage just because you're bored or just because you have an agenda that is meant to somehow intimidate me. So as you're moving through the energies of 2022, I feel it would be important for you to tap into that superpower combination. Remember that you are your own boss. You're in charge of you. And that that Leo placement is going to help you remember just how valuable you are to this world, and that and to the systems, how valuable you are to contribute to that. And you might, with your sun in Aquarius, you're destined to come up with new and better ways of doing things. I mean, that's just the way it is. So you're destined to come up with, how can we do this better? This isn't working. How can we do this better? And then with Mercury in Aquarius, in that sixth house, in that house of being of service in some way, shape, or form, you have your sun and Mercury conjunct. So you have this beautiful superpower doubling down of, yes, we're going to innovate. Yes, we're going to climb out of the box. Yes, we're going to dig ourselves out of this hole. And it's going to be through innovation and doing things with a futuristic sensibility, right? Then, you know, another thing I just want to touch on a little bit is that we have Chiron, which is us representing the centaur, the wounded healer, right? and Chiron being in Taurus in your 8th house. And, 8th house is sexual magic. It's also this, it's this relationship. It's also, but like intimacy, like an intimate relationship. So how can we work with the wisdom of our sensitivities around this? So for other words, it may not feel so good for you. And this is, a lot of people don't feel this way. A lot of people feel this way. It may not be, and to correct me if I'm wrong, but it may not be so, comfortable for you when you are feeling unsafe,
Yes.
right? When you
Yes.
are feeling like you are out of your comfort zone.
Mhm.
Not that you don't take risks, but for you, it feels like with Chiron and Taurus in your 8th house, that from that very deep and I want to say dark place, but not a dark place where I say it's negative. I mean dark in the way that a beautiful way, in that it's like the soil, the richness. It's
Yeah.
like in the marrow of your bones. If you don't feel safe. So one of the questions I feel that we could be looking at here is, with so much uncertainty going around us in the last couple of years, and now additional uncertainty, that how can you help to nourish and fortify yourself by honoring the fact that safety is important for you? What can you lean on? Um how can you soothe that part of yourself so that you're not triggered, so that you know now? So what's going on, if any of us, and most of us who are experiencing the world as it is, no one likes to feel unsafe. I don't think, but there's something here very integral to something that could trigger you, that if safety is at risk, it could be. So one thing to mitigate in 2022 would be, how do you cope with and deal with stress, anxiety? So one of the medicines for you in 2022 would be to find a routine or a regimen or tools that mitigate stress and anxiety, because I feel that if that somehow gets to a boiling point, having you come back in from that can take some heavy lifting. In other words, what can you do as a prophylactic way of moving into the new year with mitigating as much stress and anxiety? Um, and that could be all kinds of mindfulness approaches and breathing, and working on breath work, and training our bodies how to respond. So one area that I've been really fascinated with, have you done any reading or studying around the vagus nerve?
No.
Okay, so the vagus nerve is more studies are coming out around it, but there's a wonderful book called, I think it's called How to Activate Your Vagus Nerve. And the vagus nerve is a critical element in helping us regulate our nervous system, because stress and anxiety create inflammation in the body, and inflammation leads to disease. So more and more studies are coming out about how the vagus nerve is integral to helping us create a healthy ecosystem within our own bodies. There's so much healing that we can do for ourselves, that we're not really taught about. We're not really taught these things, right? It's more like, you can take acute medicine or a pill or whatever have you, and that will help us, right, move through it in a heroic fashion. Heroic medicine, meaning if there's something acute going on, we want to deal with it right then and there. That's the heroic approach. However, there's all kinds of other ways to work to condition the body, so that if and when we have a response that causes us stress or distress, we've already got a strong foundation, so it won't impact us as much. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It's like it's like those old commercials, the Charmin commercials, where like the kid was either learning to walk or skateboard or ride a bike, and they packed their little pants with like toilet paper. Do you remember those commercials?
Yeah.
And then if the kid fell down, it'd be like, oh, you're just falling on, Charmin tissue paper or whatever.
Mhm.
It's like that. It's like bolstering us so that if and when the impact happens, there's less trauma. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I don't know what those areas are for you, or how that looks for you, but there is something coming in that feels to me it has a lot to do with taking care of your body, which is the emperor, the embodiment, right? And the embodiment of agency, of personal power. So it feels very and again with Nine of Pentacles, right? So here's another form of embodiment, and this is a very when you think of the idea of the energy of Taurus about feeling safe, this is like Taurus energy on fleek. It's like she's got everything she needs. She's got a garden full of bounty. It doesn't have that Taurus energy to it.
Yes.
It's crossing your Hierophant, because I feel that when you're not feeling safe, when you're not feeling supported, when you're not feeling like you have the resources you need, it impacts your sense of sovereignty, your sense of holiness, your sense of being of spirit, because pentacles are earth as well.
Yes.
So whatever is happening on the earthly plane, I would say, and that has nothing to do with what's going on around you, because we have control over so little. It's about what's happening on the earthly plane, meaning what's happening in your own garden, literally, what's happening in your own personal space to create that sense of safety, that sense of support. That is the medicine to integrate in with the Hierophant, so that your spirit remains unto itself, a nonplussed, and then working on creating that sense of safety, but again, relying on your heart and your emotions and your intuition to lead the way in how you create that sense of safety. And to remember that when things are not going in the direction you want them to, right? It's one more example of how much we don't have control over. And also, as that's happening, there's no reason to add insult to injury by taking on things that don't belong to you in the first place. Right? So you see how this is kind of building. And then the Emperor, where we're moving to, is that we want to come back into that sense of having the right to be here without overcrowding anybody else, without dominating. It's not about dominance. It's about just being empowered. Big difference between power and force. And I talk about this on, I think, several videos. And the book, Power versus Force by Dr. David Hawkins, which helps us remember that power is something that is intrinsic to our nature, that we already have power. But when we feel like we don't have power, but we have this innate desire to dominate, right? And to control, that turns into force. Then it becomes officious. Then it becomes us imposing our will over someone else, because we do not inherently feel safe. We only impose our will over other people when we don't have the confidence and the sense of self sustenance to know that no matter what anybody else does around us, it has nothing to do with us. Nothing to do with us. So there's some of the medicine going into 2022. How does any of that sound so far?
A little bit confusing, a little bit like common sense at the same time. Like it kind of gels, but at the same time, I'm like, how is this going to happen for me? What am I like? I'm just like, I'm a little bit confused. So I'm just like, let's sit back and see.
So, okay. So if it feels if it feels confusing in the sense of how do I apply it,
Yeah.
one thing we can remember is just sort of having a blanket statement, right? So here's one that I offer up only because it resonates with me. But as you are moving forward, right, instead of wondering how you're going to tackle or handle each possible each possible situation, of which it's hard to necessarily predict what those could be because parts are moving all the time. One starting place to kind of lean on, to anchor ourselves, is to ask ourselves, what is this life affirming? Is this a life affirming choice? Now that would be for you, right? Is it life affirming? So in a way that you can apply this, which comes down to taking your right, being in your power, remembering that you are connected to spirit at all times, with or without a sense of safety. Okay. We don't necessarily, well, here's the thing. We have the agency and we have the right to create as much safety around us as we want. In other words, it's our right to do that. Are the elements always in place in the sense of like, is everything around us supporting that sense of safety? Not always, but we can still bring it back closer to home to say, how can I make this feel safe for myself? And one way you can do that is to just call in a barometer so that you know if it's like it's either life affirming or it's not life affirming, right? And there can be shades of it, like there can be shades of that, but at the end of the day, it's somewhat black and white. It's like, is this life affirming for me or is it not life affirming? And either way, they can fall like, oh my gosh, yes, this is a big yes. This is a big life affirming yes. Or it can be somewhere on the middle of the scale, like, yeah, it'll do. Or it could also be on the very end of it, being like, oh, barely life affirming, but life affirming, right? And then the same for the other. Is this incredibly not life affirming? Is it somewhat not life affirming? Do you know what I mean? So you can make choices from a starting point. And if life affirming feels right to adapt to adopt and use, go for it. But there could be some other sort of mantra, if you will, that you either think through or feel through or write down or something like that, that you can use as a launching pad. How does that feel?
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Feels good. Yeah.
And then when you move into sort of looking at some of the other placements in your chart, you have your moon in Cancer, which is a really like delicious sort of placement. They love each other. The moon loves Cancer, Cancer loves the moon. You also have that in your 10th house, at least the system I'm using. So if you were to use, this is Placidus, but if you were to use other systems, you might find it in a different house. But for our reading today, for our purpose today, you have your moon in Cancer, and Cancer is, we talked earlier regarding the Queen of Cups, that emotion, right? Relying and listening to your emotions and trusting your feelings. Trusting your feelings and knowing that your feelings are there as a superpower for you. They're nothing to be scared of. They are also landing in the 10th house. So we talked earlier about career. So 10th house is more career, 6th house is more how am I of service or job. But career and the 10th house can mean, as you walk through a new chapter in your life regarding a job or career, that listening to your feelings. Listen to those feelings. So those feelings are going to have so much to say. There's so much wisdom and information there. So if you're ever in conflict in any way with feelings, now having Virgo as your rising sign, it's not that Virgo doesn't have feelings, but Virgo is a very pragmatic sign. It likes logic, it likes things to make sense. And feelings don't always necessarily make sense to us, right? It could be, they could feel irrational, they could feel erratic, they could feel whatever else have you, because they are. Here's another thing to remember is that our feelings are very connected to how our mind works. So if we're not in a space of calm or that sort of idea we talked about, the vagus nerve, if we haven't conditioned ourselves to have a bodily environment of peace and calmness, right? Our feelings have more of a tendency, because our thoughts, if they're in a space of erratic chaos or fear, they trigger us, right? So it's like our thoughts and then our feelings. It's like I'm thinking this thing and now I'm feeling this way. So one thing to hone in is to use that beautiful, like pragmatic application of Virgo when things start to go down that way. If they start to go in that direction, you can rein it in and be like, these are just my thoughts. These are just my thoughts, and my thoughts are creating these feelings. So how can I have a better relationship with what goes on in my mind space, right? To help balance that out. So when you had asked, what does 2022 have in store? It has all of these things in store, in the sense of this is the medicine guiding you forward to be able to move into the uncertainties, to move into a space, and to somehow, some way, I think in many ways, get support for all that you've walked through. And for most of us who have been paying attention and walking around on planet Earth, it's been pretty traumatic. I mean, there's been a lot of trauma. So another thing to look into is to find support and structure around taking better care of our bodies, for sure, and our mental health. So the Emperor, again, Aries, associated with the sign of Aries. Aries is a sign that just comes into the world screaming. It's the first sign of the zodiac. It doesn't care how loud it is. It's like a baby screaming. It doesn't matter. They don't care. I'm here. And so the Emperor, the medicine of the Emperor, invites you to take care of yourself, that making yourself a priority, making yourself the priority is not a problem. That's actually the medicine of 2022, is to make yourself a priority, in the same way that a baby makes themselves the priority, without wondering, oh, I'm sorry if I'm waking you up, I'm hungry. Like it doesn't have any sense of how its own personal needs for survival impact another, in the sense that their needs need to be met. And at the same time, babies are really sensitive and receptive. So they can pick up on whether or not someone's, babies can't live without affection. I mean, they're very codependent, they're very dependent, right? So there is a beauty in that vulnerability. So I think there's also an invitation for vulnerability around the healing. And that could just mean you letting yourself be fully seen by someone who can hold the space. I'm a big proponent of, we're doing like the healing arts here. I'm a big fan of the healing sciences. So it could be talk therapy, it could be something along the lines of the healing sciences for our mental wellness and for our emotional wellness. And going back to the healing sciences, the book I mentioned about how to activate the vagus nerve, that's the healing sciences. That's working with the body in a way that is biological and very much within our control. So we have a lot of power one of the things to remember is that you have in 2022 is that you may not have a lot of control. We don't have a lot of control over things in general, but we do have a lot of agency. And we do have agency and we have power. So even though we may not have control, it's about bringing it back to the fact that we have agency and we have power. And we can always step into those two qualities. And neither of those qualities can be diminished unless in some way, shape, or form, we acquiesce to that, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Right? So like no one can take your power away unless some way, somehow you have in some way engaged in a way that allows someone to cross that threshold, cross that boundary. How does that feel?
That sounds awesome. That actually like that I've something like hit me when you said, even though we don't have control, we have agency and power. That like,
Yes.
that feels really good. That's like
Good.
gonna be my mantra. Like we have agency and power.
Yeah.
That feels really that really struck me right now.
That landed well.
Yeah, really well.
Good. And with Saturn and Leo, I'm not surprised. I mean, Leo is the king of the jungle, right? And Saturn wants it this way, and they, not gonna foo-fa around. And so there's that combination of drive and courage and application. And you need that dedication to courage. You need that. We all need that. But to kind of go through some of the things that many of us, if not all of us, have been, I don't want to say asked to go through, but, that we've been exposed to, it's not been an easy ride. And so it's really calling on the courage. It's really calling on the heart and how we stand in our own power.
Yeah.
In our own agency. And I feel that that's going to be sort of the medicine for many of us, right? Moving into this new year.
Yeah.
Feel any questions that came through that we talked on?
Oh, you like so many things. Like, is this a life affirming choice? Like, I'm totally gonna implement that. Like, in my life and making myself a priority.
Yes.
I'm like, those are things that I really need for myself, or like, because I don't make myself number one. I always make everybody else number one.
Yeah, I can see that with your moon in Cancer.
I make everybody else number one.
In the 10th house. I mean, it's
I'm always taking care of somebody. I love taking care of people. That's like my thing. But
it's your medicine. It's part of your medicine. But remember that it's the same application of like, when you take off on a plane, if you need to pull out the oxygen masks, we got to put that on ourselves first. We take care of ourselves first in order to take care of others. And I'm not going to take your medicine that brings you joy, and no one should and no one can take that away from you. There it is, plain as day, Moon in Cancer in your 10th house, big institutions, big picture, corporate, all of that stuff. Career, it's like your dharma in a way, is to take care of other people.
Yeah.
At the same time, you need to be nourished. You need to be supported. You need a foundation of whether it's caring for yourself or calling in the team. You know what I mean?
And it's really funny because I'm like always taking care of other people, and I don't take care of myself. And like, this is basically just telling me like I need to take care of me. I need to. You said like get with the healing sciences, mental and emotional wellness, the vagus nerve. Like we need, like, oh my God, all of it just resonates so deeply with me right now.
And all of that is at your fingertips. And when I say like how we can tone the vagus nerve, I mean it's so approachable. It's not like you have to buy equipment or you have to see a specialist. I mean, one way to tone and amplify the vagus nerve is to you know, they call it cold plunging, or, you know, like people will go swimming in the cold. You can
Yeah.
just, at the very end of your shower, if you can't tolerate a cold shower in the middle of January or February or wherever you are, you can just let that cold water hit the back of your neck, you know, as you're on your way out. I mean, you'll
That
read
is
it.
so weird. I do that sometimes.
You do
That
that
is
sometimes.
so weird.
So you're intuitively already toning your vagus nerve.
That
And
is so weird that you said that.
so you're already doing it. You're already, see, you already know see, this is the thing. We don't know, we may not know why we're doing the things we're doing, but we know how to access medicine. We really do. Well, we just don't necessarily know where it's coming from. But as you'll love this, then there's all kinds of things that you can do, and it costs nothing, right? As long as you've got access to cold water. And you don't have to do the full Monty. You don't have to jump in the ocean. But I do know people that do, and they swear by it.
I know people that do too.
Swear by it. It resets the nervous system. It gets you right into the present moment. And that's a lot of what we are trying to do when we do mindfulness practices, is there's other medicine and science behind why that cold plunge, it affects the heart too. So there's scientific and biological beauty and magic behind it, but it's also brings us right into the present moment. Oh, and it helps us also, that shock to the system, that taking in of that deep breath. I'm not a scientist or a doctor, but if you do go down this vagus nerve rabbit hole, you're going to love it, because you'll see how it actually really is. It's scientific, and you could do 10, 20 things a day that help tone your vagus nerve. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it's right here for you. So I think one of the things and messages too that's coming in for many of us, if not all of us, again, is taking responsibility for our wellness, and taking responsibility for how we relate to our mind, body, and spirit. It's so important that we recognize and realize that this is the house we live in. The body is the house that we live in temporarily. So that is, you want to talk about safety and all the rest of it, you can start to think about your body. Again, what's going to happen with 2022? What's going to happen? We don't know. But what we do know is that we are in this body, in this present moment. So that world, this ecosystem, this environment, we have agency, and we can feel empowered through our relationship with our bodies. And the world is an extension of our bodies. So we can also think about how we relate to planet Earth. And I'm not talking about the world and its inhabitants of the world, although we have our fellow our sentient beings, human and non-human and so forth. However, one way to relate to what's happening in 2022 is also being in touch with planet Earth. And remembering that we do share this earth with other sentient beings. So how do we consider and care for those that we share the planet with? So these are just a few things that, you can start to direct your attention to in the coming year. So I would say one of the things to reframe, if it feels available and supportive, is to reframe the inquiry from what does 2022 have in store for me? 2022 is here, whether, it's time, right? Saturn, right? It's time. More than that question is, what do I have in store for me in 2022? What do you have in store for you in 2022? And that's what you can focus on, because that's what you do have agency over. So anytime it starts to broaden out, Sandra, from like your question, like that's like, oh my, what's happening? Where is it? Where is it going? Bring it right back home again, right back to earth, in the heart, in the body, and redirect your question. Well, what am I doing? What do I have in store for me? And you don't have to chunk the whole thing off at once. You could do a broad stroke, but you can say every day, every minute of the day, what do I have in store for me? Am I feeding my body with good food? Am I getting as much sunlight as I possibly can, or fresh air? Am I taking into my body things that are life affirming? And from that point on, whatever crosses the gate, that's another question you can ask yourself. Whatever you consume, and I mean that mind, body, and spirit, through our senses, is this life affirming? And then go from there.
Excellent.
Right?
Thank you so much.
You are so welcome. And that's not to say that you can't have a little wiggle room. So am I going to say you can never have a potato chip because it's got high salt and high fat content and all the rest of it? No, I think unless the doctor says otherwise, you can have a freaking potato chip, because if it's life affirming in the sense that it brings you some kind of joy, or you just love the hit of that salt on your tongue, and yeah, are we going to have 40 bags in 1 week? Let's not do that. But what I'm also saying is, like, it doesn't have to be so that you are like, what's the word? Like, divorcing yourself from the totality of the experience. It's just something that you can ask yourself. So you might say, is this potato chip life affirming? You'd be like, hell yeah, right now this potato chip is so life affirming, and boom. But when you have it, it like explodes in your mouth and it creates this experience, right? And then that might satiate you enough, versus what may not be life affirming is, say, taking down a whole bag of highly salted, fatty stuff because you're mindlessly disassociating. You know what I mean? And that's like something does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
So it's not about being a goody two shoes, or or not being a little bit of a devil every once in a while. It's just about keeping things in perspective on a very grand scale. Like, how is this all coming together?
Excellent.
Right?
I'm excited. That's very exciting. Thank you so much, Diane.
I'm so excited for you. Thank you so much for letting me share this with you, and for being a part of this, and helping me share what I love to share through the tarot and astrology, and for letting us look at all your details.
It's freaking fascinating. Let me tell you what. It's like the way you like integrate all of it together and make it play together is so beautiful. So thank you. This was a beautiful reading.
Thank you so much. I'm so appreciative of that. And thanks for tuning in, everybody, if you're watching this, and stay tuned for more of this kind of juicy stuff. Lots of love. Bye.